everyone, and thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome to pauseforthetruth.com. I am Jocelyn Turner. I'm going to let you all know now I've been experiencing some technical difficulties. So if you hear me, you see me talking, but you don't hear me, my trusted co-host, Dr. Kane, will take over. And he actually made a joke before we got on, like, oh, we can't hear you talking, Miss Turner. Savor the moment.
Yeah.
But kidding, kidding, all jokes aside. Dr. Kane, how are you this evening?
I am doing absolutely wonderful, Miss Turner. I'm glad to see our guests are here. It's such an interesting show topic, uh, a very difficult one from my perspective, because I am not that knowledgeable to be able to contribute a lot. But I'm waiting for these guys to teach me so I can be very learned in terms of how to manage my finances.
Well, what I like about this show, Dr. Kane, we try to bring topics to our audience as we want to learn ourselves. So, it is a learning opportunity for all of us, and we do encourage our listeners or those who are viewing us as we begin the discussion to please post your questions, and we will. One of our guests will answer them. So tonight we are pleased to welcome one person I know, and the other person I will get to know tonight. I'm going to go with the person that I know, and that is Mariko Walker. I met Mariko a few years ago, and if I had paid attention to him, I might be wealthy right now. But we'll go with I was hard hit. How are you doing, Mariko?
I'm doing awesome, Miss Turner. Looking forward to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And we also have attorney Gregory Redmond, and I am looking forward to hearing from you and your expertise in this area. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, Ms. Turner. Dr. Kane, good to have the opportunity to speak with you and your audience tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm gonna start by asking a basic question. It might be a simple one, but what have you found that people don't understand? And both of you can answer it, and I'll just go with Mariko. I'll ask you first. What have you found that people just don't understand about their finances?
For me, one of the biggest things that a person can learn is knowing time is your greatest asset. Your money has like a little stopwatch, and all you need to do is start putting it away, and it'll start working for you. The more time your money has to work, the more you will have. So sometimes we can feel like we have the time and we'll put it off. But if you start soon, the less you will need to get to where you need to be.
I have that conversation, and just have to follow up with a follow up question, and I won't specify who. I almost did, and whoo, I caught myself. But I had a conversation with someone once when I said the same, similar to what you said. Not, of course, I'm not a financial expert, but I just said, start saving something. It
Mm.
doesn't, the amount doesn't matter. And quite frankly, they said, I don't have anything to spare. Well, I said, if you smoke or drink alcohol, you have money to spare. Was that disrespectful, or was I on point?
Wasn't disrespectful for it all. All I can do is kind of go back and tell a little bit about my story. I remember we went through the recession, and I remember, losing a job, and I had to start over. And I remember only having the opportunity where a job came around making $8 an hour. So I had to start lower, put my pride aside. Mariko, you have a family. And I remember taking that, and it wasn't about the necessary amount I was saving. It was developing a rhythm, a habit about doing it. Because if we're faithful with the little, we'll get more. So it's all about starting, building a habit, consistency. That's really what matters.
Thank you. And tell me, should I call you Attorney Redmond, Gregory? How would you like for me to address you, Attorney Redmond. I'll just go there.
Well, I want you to be very comfortable on your own show, Ms. Turner. So if you want to call me Gregory, that's fine.
Well, Gregory, I want to ask you the question because I know your expertise, thank you, in dealing with people and property. I know I've always heard growing up that you should buy property as a way to build wealth in your family. Is that still a good option for people?
Well, it's probably a pretty good option depending on what your competence is in dealing with property. But in full disclosure to the audience, I'm coming at this from an attorney standpoint, and my practice focuses in on estate planning and elder law subjects. So I'm going to let Mr. Walker tell everybody about how to accumulate wealth and the options that are good for them. But I also want to interject something that's fairly important, and that is, after you have an estate, what are you going to do with it? Most people don't realize that they have a living estate, then they have the estate after they pass away. And if we have time this evening, I want to touch on some of those subjects because it becomes critical in my practice area on speaking with people about their options. And I find that most people don't have even a fractional view of what their options are with regard to the importance of estate planning.
Ms. Turner, let me say this, gentlemen. When we discussed this show, we definitely wanted to talk about building wealth, retaining wealth, and then how to pass it on to your family. And both of you guys have touched on this, and we're trying to do it in a logical manner. Obviously, the financial planner is the guy that we're looking to help build wealth, and Greg, it's okay to call you Greg. I'm not going to call you Gregory, but Greg, you're all about making sure we retain that wealth and can pass it on to our loved ones in a very logical, useful, legal fashion, with as little obstructions to them obtaining this wealth as possible. So they do go hand in glove in terms of the show altogether. So since we're talking about building wealth, Ms. Turner, go ahead.
Yeah, so and I guess I'll start with Mariko and Gregory. I'm going to come back to you, so don't think I'm letting you off the hook right now. I am letting you off the hook right now, but I definitely want to come back to you because as boomers, and I have to admit that, and I was a little sad, by the way, when I realized I was at the cutoff of being a baby boomer. I thought I was anyway. I digress. So Mariko,
old lady.
So Mariko, how should I get started, or how, anyone who's listening, what would you tell people? How do you get started? I know you talked about just put some money aside. I mean, just wherever, start small and you'll see your money grow. But the thing for me that was difficult when I started exploring whether, the 401k, 401b and all those things. And then when they said, well, how do you want to go? You want to go conservative or aggressive, which one of the things to choose? I just like A, B, C, D, that one. Do you know what I mean? So how do you tell people how to get started?
So before I kind of get to that point, I'm gonna put this in as a structure. So when I'm talking to somebody, there are three different components that I want to talk about. One is protecting someone's wealth. Second is growing the wealth, and then being able to transfer the wealth. So as it relates to protecting someone's wealth. So let's say, for instance, somebody have a dream of building wealth. We have to make sure that we have to protect is the ability to earn income. The risk is moved away. So I have to make sure that I have done my budget. There's a freed up discretionary income, and I have put in place some form of life insurance in place. I have removed the risk away from me being able to build wealth for my family, regardless if I'm living or have passed away. Move the risk away. Not only while I have done that, let's talk about how we grow this wealth. Well, we can grow this wealth two ways. It could be passively or it can be actively. If somebody is passively building their wealth, that means that they don't want to maybe invest in real estate. They may not want to invest in a business, but they want to have their money working for them. So the younger you are, you can be in more equity-based investments, but you cannot be emotional. You have to have some form of emotional stability if you're going to be investing, and especially if there is time. You want your money to be growing compound interest. You don't want it to be simple interest. You want it to be compound interest, meaning your money, earning money, and that big pile of money now is earning more money.
Mhm.
That's one form of building wealth, where you are buying things that may be invested in the market or something may be tied to the market. The active investing person, say the first investment that somebody should make is in their knowledge. What books can I read to help me understand something that I am doing? So that when the noise of maybe news of what's going on, you're not moved. Your knowledge keeps you stable and you have maybe somebody to reach out to. So we're taking that money, investing it into, if we're talking about active investing, could be in real estate, could be in a business, but definitely want to invest in your knowledge to actively build wealth. There's other things you can do. And then we're talking about transferring the wealth. Transferring the wealth is like, Attorney Redmond's talking about having something like a revocable living trust. If you have a family and you have a life insurance policy, you want to make sure if it's a couple that they may set up an estate plan, maybe a trust where that money can go into, and they will have an executor that will carry out those wishes. They have a guardian in writing that will make sure that the houses, the vehicle, the bank account, the IRAs can be properly transferred without going through probate. So I hope that was some form of structure for a conversation. But we need to talk about how somebody form a budget, how to get out of debt, how to improve credit. All those things matter as it relates to building wealth.
And I should have started there, really, though, Mariko, because that's usually the first conversation and realization that we need to have with ourselves is, what's our debt like? Because if you don't, and now, the first of the year, you hear folks saying, pay off your highest interest credit cards first. Whereas a lot of us think, well, I only owe a couple of $100. I'll pay the small one off first, but it may be the smallest interest on that. You know what I mean? Am I saying it right? Versus another one that you may owe more, and of course, the interest is higher. So is it true that you should first look at your debt and start trying to get that down before you start saving? Or can you really do both at the same time?
It is a both. It's not a one or the other. It is a both. And let me tell you why. Let's say, for instance, we have used a credit card, or we have a vehicle, or we have a mortgage, and we're working to pay that off, and we're just really throwing money at those debts to get them down. Mm-hmm. And there's not very much in savings. When I looked at the statistics, it said that 44% of Americans don't have $400 to come up with an emergency. So I want to come up because it can. I want to make sure that you're not getting back in debt when we're just throwing money at it. It should be a both. Saving while paying the debt off. And kind of adding to your question, Ms. Turner, is there are two ways you can go about paying your debts off. One way is that you can tackle the small debt first, even though it has a higher interest rate. But a lot of times people won't some happiness. They want some progress. And what paying off that smaller debt does, it's saying that, okay, I'm moving forward. I am achieving my goals. We're going to do that this year. That's what paying that smaller debt off does. But at the same time, a person can tackle the bigger debt with the lower interest rate on it. They can do that too as well. I just like tackling the smaller one off because I want some motivation throughout the year that we're making progress.
So, Dr. Kane, I'm going to ask you the question. I'm putting you on the spot, so hold on. You're on your own business, right? And so I think that it's an opportunity for businesses as they employ people to have the conversation. It's not their responsibility, it's an opportunity for businesses to connect their employees or encourage them to save. Can businesses put something in place? And I don't know if this is true or not, but can businesses, I know where I work, for instance, we were made aware of the 401B plans that were the deferred compensation plans that were made available to us. Can small businesses have that same opportunity? And I don't know if it's a question for you or one of our guests. Can small business owners make that opportunity available to their employees, particularly if you work for a company, a small business that doesn't have a pension plan, for instance, as an option? Because pension plans are sometimes the way that people, have that forever income.
Well, as a small business owner, you're right. I don't have a whole lot of monies, but I did what I've done at my place is I've tag teamed with a large company like Paychex, and I've put in a 401k for opportunities for my employees to invest in. And I'm helping match them as part of an incentive. I'm helping to match them with their investment into that 401k. Obviously, I use some of it for myself in terms of trying to, as a vehicle to save. So, but one of the other questions that come up as a small business, I am also at risk for losing monies for whatever legal actions that may come about. So I'm also very interested in making sure I protect my business from monetary loss. So, you engage somebody like, and this is where Mr. Redmond can come in, I think, in terms of how do I help, one, save my employees, even though I've just mentioned about the 401k, help my employees save money, but also how do I make sure I protect my estate from, whomever, and that I'm able to move it on to my family should something happen to me? How do I put the best plan in place? So growth is very important to me, and especially at my age, is, a lot of my growth is, my years are behind me, and I have been looking at saving and putting monies aside. But how do I protect that and make sure the right people get the wealth that I've accumulated should something happen to me either too early, for me to utilize those funds, something happened to me too early, and or just to be sure that my family's financial wealth is not at risk in a situation in which I'm a small business owner and something can happen. Is that an appropriate thing to think about, Mr. Redmond?
Absolutely, Dr. Kane. And it's really kind of key. And I'm really glad you made the comments. It's a perfect question to you, and then a segue to me, because this is the essence of what estate planning is all about. Time is actually my client's enemy. Every day that goes by that you don't have an estate plan in place, it is crucial, and it could mean the difference between dying intestate and having the Florida statutes. Now, I don't know if our audience goes outside of Florida. I'm a Florida lawyer, so I'm thinking about in terms of Florida law. Or something that a lot of people don't give any thought to, and that is what happens to me. I'm diminished, but I'm not dead. I'm in need of long-term care. And if I haven't made plans for those kinds of things in my estate plan, then I could ruin a whole idea about passing on significant wealth to a family or to my intended beneficiaries, because the absolute cost of long-term care is just astronomical. You're talking about nursing home care, or even actually the most expensive care is in-home care, because a lot of people don't want to consider putting their family members in a nursing home. But either way, there's only 3 ways you can pay for long-term care. One is self-pay, which is legacy killer. One is to get a long-term care insurance, and that's probably one of the packages that Mr. Walker would like to talk to his clients about. And the other is getting government benefits, because believe it or not, even people with means can get Medicaid to get long-term care, as long as we reposition assets. You don't actually have to become destitute to get some of the benefits that are available. You just need to talk to an attorney like me that knows how to help people plan. And I look at everything that we're talking about is the necessity to have a comprehensive estate plan. I mentioned a living estate. That's the most valuable thing you have in your estate, Dr. Kane, is you. And you can't accumulate enough wealth that can supplant your value to your own estate. And first is to you. How do I avoid the necessity of being a guardian in a guardianship proceeding where the circuit court is interrupting my exercise of civil liberties because I'm in a diminished capacity? I'm either physically or cognitively diminished, but I haven't made a plan for that. Well, one of the simplest plans that people can do is put together a set of advanced directives. That's durable power of attorney, designation of healthcare surrogate, living will. Those are the rudiments. But there are other things that we could put into that. So we want to think in terms of our advanced directives for anybody that's 18 years old or older. So everybody has an estate interest in themselves. I want to have a legal framework in place such that if I cannot make decisions, I'm incompetent or incapacitated to carry out my affairs, who do I trust that has the legal authority to act on my behalf? That's estate planning 101. We got to take care of me first. And the next thing people think about estate planning, they don't think about anything other than getting a last will and testament. Well, that's great. But Mr. Walker mentioned something that's key. There are other alternatives to a last will and testament. You might want to consider having a trust framework for your estate, because I want my clients to avoid probate. I would like them to have probate alternatives. A trust is one thing, but one of the things that nobody needs a lawyer for, and it's really good for managing things so that's never been probated, put beneficiaries on your accounts. Name pay on death beneficiaries. If you do simple things like that, those funds that you have earmarked for loved ones will never have to be probated. You never have to go to a court to figure out who's going to do what. And another thing people don't think about as far as their personal property is we can do certain kinds of deeds in Florida that make the transition from you, the homeowner, to whomever you would like to see inherit your property, that's fractional in cost, to paying an attorney to do a probate to clear up the issues of who owns what. One final thing, and I'm going to go back to Dr. Kane's thing. What can I do as a business owner to protect myself? I want to provide for my clients and my employees, but I also want to make sure that all my hard work doesn't go for naught. So you want to think about how I have my business structure. Am I using a S corporation? Am I using an LLC? Can I limit the liability not to my general wealth, but just to the business aspect of it? Should I put certain assets in a trust framework so that if I put it in a framework of trust, if people come after me, that's one thing, but they can't go after the assets I've set aside for my beneficiaries. There's a wealth of things we could talk the entire hour about and then some, but we're touching in on a subject that's really key. As we build wealth, how do we protect it for ourselves and for our family members? And that's how you marry. I like to partner with people like Mr. Walker, because he and I identify the same kind of clients as to passing one to the other. Sometimes I need to have a wealth builder for my clients, and sometimes he needs to have someone that can give legal framework to his clients. And so
Right.
I work in concert with people like Mr. Walker a lot, and I look forward to him and I having some conversation after the podcast and ways that maybe we could collaborate and look out for each other.
Well, you
Well,
said
you know, one of
something
the-
though. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You said something though that I want to get back to, just the basic thing,
Mhm.
so that tomorrow I will go to my bank and I need to do put a beneficiary to have a pay on death beneficiary. Do you have to ask for a pay on death beneficiary, or you just say, I want to add a beneficiary to my bank account?
And it could be done in any number of ways, and you don't have to use that terminology. But in the broad financial industry, people understand that term. Basically, I don't want to leave what's in my bank account to task for going to my estate. If I don't put either a co-owner or a beneficiary on the account that the account can be paid to on my demise, then those funds are going to have to be probated. And probate is inherently long process and relatively expensive to something like putting down my loved one's name on the beneficiary line or as a co-owner of the account, so that those funds never have to be probated.
Well, I have to ask this question. I'm sorry,
please.
Dr. Kane.
Go ahead.
Let me finish this thought. I have to ask this question because, all of us don't have the nicest relatives who we think might have our best interests at heart. So these people don't have access to our money until after we die. Like, if you add somebody else on your account, they can't go and get your money out while you're still living. How do you set that up to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah,
I'm just asking basic questions that I know.
No, that's a good question. That's a good question. And you do have to know who you can trust. I don't ask anybody to fly blindly as to, oh, that's what that lawyer said I've got to do. Well, if you don't have a relative that's trustworthy, then don't cut off your nose to spite your face. I'm really saying, but that's why I started with the pay on death beneficiary rather than co-owner. But both of those are strategies as to how I can avoid to ever have to probate the funds in that account, or that life insurance policy, or that pension, or whatever the case may be, or my IRA, whatever. The idea is, if I have a mechanism that already tells how it should be distributed, it's no need to probate that, and it'll avoid probate and save up to 3% in legal fees of the accumulated wealth.
So it's a pay me now or pay me later mentality.
Right.
But you pay me later is much more expensive.
Pay yourself now by just doing some very simple things rather than pay somebody else later. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other things, and I use this, I don't know how many times I see patients that come in, they either got this son or this daughter taking care of them. They thought they could trust this son or this daughter. And boy, they are being just raked over the coals in terms of losing some of their monetary assets, because this person maybe want to go and buy themselves a new house and take your money to buy a new house or whatever, a new car, whatever it may be. And as an elderly person that may be at 68 or, somebody gonna be mad at me since I said that. But, you had that 75 and 80 year old standards, and you're not quite as astute as that individual in terms of how today's electronic, management of funds work. And they get put in such a bad position that sometimes they can't even, the one that they trusted they can't, no, they can no longer trust them anymore because that person is not looking out for their best interest. They may be looking at the day they die, whatever, and looking. So not only do it, in terms of, and I'm speaking on the other side of having grown some wealth, not saying I can't grow more, but having already grown some wealth, and then making sure it's there for me when I need it. So the trust factor is great, but there needs to be some type of mechanisms in place, and I'm sure they are, because that's what you know about. Maybe in the form of trust, which we can talk about at some point in time as well. Put them in some form of trust, revocable, irrevocable, some of those things that I don't even understand, and my audience may not even understand, has how to do it in terms of once you've accumulated a fair amount of wealth. When you get in that 70-year-old range, the average lifespan for someone may be at 81. So we're talking 11 years, that you're still around. But you may have enough fun to take you beyond 11 years if managed correctly. So you got to be looking at how best to set that up. And on and on the other side of things, though, we need to make sure we can, before we get to that 70-year-old mark, to build enough wealth for that to be of concern. So I just still see where the two go together, but again, because of the different ages that we may be talking to right now, there's a plethora of things that we need to consider in terms of age, as it relates to the individual's age, and how to help manage their wealth and retain their wealth.
Sure. I'll speak briefly because some of this concerns what I do, and some of it might concern what Mr. Walker does. But here's the thing. I always like to try to make everything very client specific, because your circumstances and an expert on your life much more than I'll ever know. And so there are the clients that are unrealistic about the people in their lives, and they allow them in their orbit and make themselves. And sometimes you can't protect people from themselves. In other words, we all can see that your son is no good, but you love him and you've given him access to your life. Please know that you actually can revoke any authority you give to anybody in your life. But if you don't have the wherewithal to do it because of the emotions, then we could set up some frameworks that might help save you from yourself if you be willing to be realistic with me when you talk to me. I can give you any number of options. There's actually an option a lot of people don't even consider, and I tried to poo-poo it a little bit. I was speaking in terms of guardianship, but there's an involuntary variety, but there's also a voluntary variety. That basically, if you get in concert with Dr. Kane and tell him you're having some issues, but you understand that what you're doing, you could actually turn over management of financial affairs under, a voluntary guardianship that could help protect you, because now the guardian is an arm of the court and has to report and do inventories and account for all things concerning your life. And so you got some court oversight, but you got something that you could actually pull back if you feel like you've developed competence again. So it could be a temporary arrangement that is, I think that's a little bit farther than I like to take most clients. But if I see clients who know that they can't protect themselves from themselves, that might be an option that I would offer to them. But I like to deal in terms of maybe setting up a trust arrangement or changing agents under your advance directives. Let's get your nephew, because you can't trust your son. Your nephew actually is trustworthy. And it kind of depends on what people's tolerances are for really being pragmatic and realistic about what could be done. But there are always options, or excuse me, I should say, there are usually options for people to consider. And if Mr. Walker want to weigh in on that, I'll yield the floor to that. His chance to answer that question.
The question I had for Mariko is, talking about, you mentioned life insurance, and I know growing up, people said you always, and I mentioned growing up because it was a conversation I think that was discussed more then than now. The importance. Oh, did we lose him? Oh, we may have lost him. I think we lost
I
him.
think he's having some internet connection issues.
Coming in and out.
Yeah.
One of the things that people talked about, looks like you're back, Mariko, is life insurance, the importance of having some type of life insurance policy. And when you talk about, when Greg talked about making those designations of people who you can trust, do you encourage clients to have a life insurance plan for themselves, Mariko?
Absolutely. Because if someone depends on your income, I would say definitely have a life insurance policy. You have young kids and they depend on you. If you are married and that other spouse depends on your income, you want to definitely get a policy. Kind of bringing into what Mr. Redmond talking about estate planning. One of the things that has to take place when your assets are being transferred is you have to pay taxes on that. So to avoid money coming out of someone's account of the estate, you can have a life insurance policy pay for that. If you are accumulating assets and those assets have a mortgage on them, you can get a life insurance so that asset transfer free and clear. You can get a policy for that. If a person is a key person for a business, definitely if someone is depending on your income, your knowledge, and what you provide to that business or family, definitely have a life insurance policy. The basic rule of thumb is generally 10 times your, annual income. Generally, that's the amount that a person should have in place, but it really depends on someone's budget based on what they can do or cannot do. And that's okay. Start with something and work your way to what you need.
Obviously I'm on the older side of life. But when I was much younger, I was at this restaurant and a 50-pound motor fell and hit me on the arm. And if it was just a few feet over, it would have killed me. Okay. I just moved my youngin out the way. Luckily for her, I just moved it from that seat. It crushed the seat. But what it prompted me to do was the very next day to go out and get a life insurance policy to protect my family. Okay. In case something happened to me, because you can't be predictive of how long you're going to live. You may be in the greatest health, but again, 50-pound motor can fall off out of the ceiling in a restaurant and kill you. My thing though was at that point, I didn't mind paying what I thought was a little bit more monies for life insurance. Obviously, I was much younger, and term life might have been the thing to do, a variable life, something that you guys, you can discuss on it, particularly as a financial planner, you guys can discuss on that. But on this side, since we have such a diverse audience, on this side of life, I don't need as much life insurance, but it may also function as a vehicle for safety in turn or protection of my assets. I don't know. I'm throwing it out at you two.
Well, one of the things I kind of mentioned on that side, you were saying as you get older, Mr. Attorney Redmond mentioned something that is so important, and that's long-term care. Now, here's the one thing I know about, and I'm going to kind of show you how that relates to life insurance. 70% of people is going to need some form of care at some point in time. 70% of people are going to need it, but only 8% of people have planned for it. Now, here's what you have to pay attention to is, how are we going to pay for care? Where I don't want to take and liquidate all of my money out of my retirement account. You may not want to sell your house to pay. How can I remove the risk and still enjoy life? Well, you still can use life insurance with long-term care that can be used in 3 different ways. It could be for death. It could be for retirement income. But also, if you're in a situation where you need care, that policy can provide an income for care. So it's not just, oh, my family died, I don't need, they're grown now. Well, you could have saved enough money for your retirement in your 401k, 403b, or Roth IRA. Well, one of the things you try and do is leave an inheritance maybe for your kids' kids. So how can you make sure that when that time comes, you don't liquidate those assets? We use somebody else's money for that. And if you pass away, that money goes tax-free to your family.
That's a very good discussion, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Kane, about the uncertainty of life. Had it been a few more inches, we wouldn't even be having this conversation with you. We might be with someone else, but not with you. Right. And then what about the family? So a lot of times we think in terms of building this wealth or having an insurance vehicle to ensure my family has a certain amount of wealth. But because I deal with a lot of elders in the elder law version of my practice, I always try to break down those efforts into these little fragments. Number one, you built this up for whom? A lot of times it's partially for myself and partially for my kids, and maybe even grandkids. But then, do you know what's going to happen? First, I want to think about us taking care of you, because I like to see all of the resources that you've accumulated first benefit you. But if your goal is also to benefit family members, I want to think in terms of how those family members are going to do it. So if Dr. Kane had been killed the next day after the day that the thing fell on, and he's got his life insurance and all this kind of stuff, but he's got these small children. Who's going to get the money when you got small children? Who's going to be your beneficiary? First, it's going to go to a guardian. Is the guardian going to squander all their money before they get to be a certain age? Because it happens if we don't set up a framework. Next thing that we ought to think about is, do I want my 19-year-old inheriting through life insurance naked policy alone $200,000? What's going to happen to them when they're 29 of that $200,000 if I hadn't set up a framework? So I like to have our clients to think about that. And then if I have a situation where I've got a 31-year-old son, but what if his kid doesn't have the benefit like he did of his parent? How am I going to look after grandchildren in this whole legacy chain? So I'm thinking along with my clients now, in the foreseeable future, and in the far future, what do you want your wealth to do? We wanted to take care of you. We want to take care of your family. We wanted to take care of the family in a way that doesn't destroy them by having sudden wealth or expose them for being manipulated or sued or having bad marriages or having substance abuse issues. All of those things can be dealt with in a legal framework. And I like to help clients think about the specifics of their lives with regard to, after you work with Mr. Walker to accumulate this wealth, how do we want to manage this estate so that it makes the most sense for the most utility and covers all the subject, avoiding guardianship, avoiding the necessity of probate, and thinking in terms of what if I need long-term care, how not to destroy that wealth in a relatively short time by paying the high cost of long-term care without a plan. Got to be past that 8% that he mentioned.
One thing you talked about is estate planning, and I have a two-part question, Greg. One is, and that it may be for Mariko, but when you hear people talk about estate planning, well, people don't think I don't have an estate, I just have a house. Do you know what I mean? And so an estate sounds like I'm a wealthy person and I have wealth. And the second part of my question is, there are some people have multiple children, right? And so then when they pass on, they may say, well, I'm leaving it to my children, but the children don't get along. So how do you prepare for that so that you won't set your children up and that confusion up amongst family members? So talk to me first about, estate planning. If my house is only worth $75,000 or whatever, not a million. I don't live in a mansion.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Great question. And I touched on it earlier, but this is key. And this is why you all are having this podcast, to educate the community. You have an estate if you're a human being. No matter what other assets you have in your life, you are an estate walking around. So you have an estate. That's a misunderstanding. It's a bad way to think, because one of the things Mr. Walker said early on is I had to start over. But I learned that I've got to invest in my knowledge. Guess what you are walking around? I might not have in 2022 two nickels to rub together, but I'm a God-inspired human being that might come up with the next breakthrough in a few years. And so I got to think about me, not only right now from an estate standpoint, but what I might be because of the human potential. So let's get rid of this whole idea I don't have an estate. You are an estate. And if you're 18 years and older, you need to start thinking about estate planning. Mom and daddy's planning for you can only go so far. Now, when you turn 18, I want everybody in the audience to think in terms of my 18-year-old birthday present to you is to point you in the direction of somebody that can help you do estate planning. Now, the next question is not atypical, but here's how I want to get out of it with lawyerly skill. I've got to talk to the specific person about the specific circumstance of their relationship with their children and their children's relationship with them. We just have to be realistic, and we can put together a plan, but it's going to be case specific what we actually do. But there's almost always an answer to the question. I just have to know more facts about the situation. But I want everybody to keep in mind, there's always hope for everybody, no matter how difficult their situation is. If you get to talk to somebody that really knows what they're doing, we can pull it all together in a way that makes sense to everybody. But satisfy the progenitor or the grantor, whomever is really thinking in terms of how am I going to deal with this? Is that fair? Those answers fair enough?
Oh, absolutely. That's wonderful. Okay. And since you mentioned children, Mariko, how do we get our children started in saving? And how young should we start?
When they are born, before they even know. It's really important that we do that.
The old-fashioned piggy bank that I had when I was a kid.
That's not the place to do it. And the reason why I would say that's not the place to do it is because of right now, inflation is 7%. So if money is growing and the average interest at a regular bank account right now is 0.09 or less. Well, if we know how money works and we use this concept called the rule of 72, and divide that 72 by 0.09, that means your money would double every 800 years. And then you ask the question, how many 800 years do we have to live? Nobody will be around. And then you got to pay attention to inflation. So I have to be conscious of making sure your money is compounding at an average over inflation. So we got to be using concept like rule of 72, compound interest. And then you ask that question, when should we start? Time value of money is a really important concept. The sooner somebody starts, even as a child, let me give you an example. If a person put away $13,000 in account, birth, that will grow to over $1 million when they retire.
If they put in what? I'm sorry, you paused. If they put in how much?
So if a person put in $13,000 in an account and it averaged 9%, and that person don't put any more money in it,
Mhm.
that child will have an inheritance when they retire of $1 million. Just taking one time. Well, not everybody have $13,000 to put into an account.
Mhm.
Well, you can start at $2,500 and then $250 for 4 years, and that still will grow to over $1 million at retirement for that child, growing at an average of 9. So it's about education, getting literate, and definitely would like to talk about how somebody can do that, because that's really what the key is. Because that's like, even I do a class 3 times a year, and I do it for free, and I do it through my ministry. And one of the things I'm doing differently this year is on week number 6, I have a youth come in and teach my class. So we're developing the youth to teach how money works at a young age. So anybody who want to learn how money works, all they have to get connected. We do it for free. And also we're going to be teaching the youth too as well, these concepts, because it's not taught in school. 7 form of education where they teach one class on finances. So that's a lot of states that don't teach anything about how money works. So we're considered financially illiterate. But
one thing
the better.
One thing I want to make sure we get before we get off air, before our time is due, which is rapidly coming up. I told you guys at the start that we're going to get in such a conversation that an hour is going to seem like totally inadequate enough time to discuss, which it is. But I want to make sure we do a couple of things. One is make sure we get information to you gentlemen put on our website so that people can reach you, okay? Because we broadcast live on Facebook, and we're also on YouTube, but we're also stored on our website so people can come back and take a look at this and hear what you guys have to say, but also be able to contact you guys and utilize your services. The other elephant in the room for me is this pandemic has really brought out a whole lot of things about the necessity of estate planning. I had a family of 6, and 4 of them died within 48 hours of each other, leaving a young teenager and her aunt, left out of that family of 6. So now that aunt has the responsibility of raising this young teenager. And if that parent, which I'm pretty sure they did not, didn't have a mechanism by which should they pass on, because death is always unexpected to those who expect to live a long time, then that young teenager has to fend for themselves. And so, and I'm not saying, life is always, can be unfair. And so what you guys are bringing to the table tonight is the importance of planning for the unexpected. And so I want to make sure that our guests have our audience has an opportunity to reach out, to both of you guys, and so that you can provide services for them. So let's make sure we put that at least in our on our website and in the comment section there, Tyrone, JT, since you guys are more apt about this than me, make sure that people can reach them, because they have some very, very valuable information by which and knowledge to pass on to our audience.
And I think, thank you, Dr. Kane, and you're right. And I see Mariko, you put your contact information in there, and Greg, if you could do the same, just kind of in the comment section. But this is a lot. I will go to bed tonight praying that I wake up tomorrow in my right mind and physically able to do those things, put those things in place that you all mentioned. I think the thing that I got from the conversation is I need to go to my bank and because I have more than one bank, go to my banks and add to my account someone to which I already have done that, but I'm just speaking hypothetically. Make sure someone's name is added on my account so that if something happens to me, and sometimes, as Dr. Kane mentioned, because of the pandemic, something untimely happens to me, then they will have access to it. But the other part of it is what Greg talked about, is the whole idea of an estate plan. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of people don't think that they are wealthy enough to have an estate. So to have that conversation and to make that, known that we all deserve to have an estate plan. But Greg, I don't know, I respect your profession, but can I afford an estate plan? When I come to an attorney, is that something that the average Joe or Jill can afford, or is it based on your income? Is it a standard fee? I mean, I'm just being realistic, that people think, well, I don't make a lot of money, but I do want to have something in place. So is it affordable for people?
Maybe a better question is, can I afford not to? But go ahead. You're muted, Greg.
I'm muted. That was the first thing I thought about of Dr. Kane's comment. But let's be realistic, because not everybody's going to be able to afford to have trust drawn up, and it may not be even a necessity. But let's remember some of the key components of an estate plan. We can do at the bank and with the accounts what Jocelyn was talking about. So that's part of planning for estate. You can go online and go to the Office Depot and get certain forms to fill out your advance directives and make sure you got somebody in place. You can even get your last will and testament. Some components, even if it's not a comprehensive plan like I might put together for a wealthy client, or a near wealthy client, or even a client that's not so wealthy but probably has a job and can do something. Because I always try to let people have cherry pick out of what the comprehensive plan looks like. What do I want to do right now? So it's kind of almost like the inverse of the wealth building plan. Let's start somewhere. Let's just not leave it to chance and do nothing, because doing nothing is a catastrophe waiting to happen. So let's do something that takes charge over the dignified way that God gave me my life. My life is a life of dignity, and I should have respect enough for myself to take an interest in myself and not demean myself by what I don't have, because the world is open to me on what I might have. But until I get the world of things that I might have, let me take care of what I do have. If that's.
And you know what else that I thought about that you mentioned that made me think about having those people you can trust. And I have to say this, that people shouldn't make their loved ones feel obligated to leave something to them. My whole attitude is my wealth. I give it to my dog if I want to. Do you know what I'm saying? And people should not put that. That's why so many older people don't designate, I think, who if they have, multiple children or whatever, or grandchildren, who they're going to leave it to. They rather just let them deal with it when I'm gone. But that's not really a good way. You should not make your loved one feel that way, that they are obligated to leave something to you. That's a benefit that they leave to you, not something that you are entitled to. That whole entitlement mentality. And I know that had nothing to do with the conversation, but I just had to get it off my mind.
Well, that's not true.
Wait a minute. Now that's key to the conversation, because it's something right. I touched on, but I didn't dwell on it. Now, here's this. If you were my client and you were talking to me about your life, my first priority, my second priority, and my third priority is, how does this work for you? If we don't get to your legacy, that's not all that important to me, because I got to take care of you, my client. And if we have a way to fully take care of you and still have a legacy, then we get win, win, win. But I'm going to get win, win with you. I want you to be focused in on taking care of you with your accumulated wealth, because it is your estate, and your estate should be sacrosanct as to what we take care of. It should be in your mind, and it should be in your attorney's mind as the biggest priority. Because if I'm thinking about your legacy more than I'm thinking about you, I'm not doing my job to you. And that's the sacred relationship between the attorney and client. So I want to take care of you first, second, third, and we get to fourth, we'll take care of your legacy.
Well, as a single person, not talking about myself, but people who know me, I'm single and I'm not married and I don't have any children. So I may think, well, I'm like, I remember Steve Harvey said one day, my kids weren't worrying about what I'm going to leave to them. I'm spending all my money now. But, on a serious note, I think if there are people who are like me and are single, we still need to make sure that we have a plan. And the thing that gets me the most, that disturbs me the most, when I see communities of where elderly people live, they purchase their homes. And, back in the day when we dealt with racism, it was a privilege to be able to be a homeowner. And then to see how sibling, just the disgust that they have amongst themselves, the property just goes to waste. And it's torn down because nobody has cared for the property and paid taxes on it and all. And so, really, I hope what people got from this discussion is to, first of all, have a conversation within your family about money. Understand how money works. Understand how to build that and grow wealth in your family. Because, we all say we wish we had a rich relative. Well, why can't we be that rich relative that builds that legacy for our family? I got a smile out of Mariko. He liked that. To build that wealth within our family, it starts with us. So I hope people got that from the discussion tonight, that you can start tomorrow, but first protect your assets, what you do have, and you are an asset. You are, that's one thing I learned from Greg in terms of the estate planning. Make sure you get that advance directive and the last will and testament, those things, and really, do your homework. You don't know where to start. Mariko put his contact information on there to help you, teach you. He talked about his free training that you can attend, and bring your team, your children, have your children a part of it. Most of us are working virtual anyway, so you might be able to go online. I don't know. He can explain more to you, but again, take advantage of the opportunities, but don't be passive. Start somewhere. I think that's the thing that I got. Tomorrow, start somewhere. Sure, it may take you a few days to put some things in place, but hopefully we had enough discussion to help you get started. And we're not stopping, as Dr. Kane said. We knew that this was the beginning of a conversation, and we're going to continue the discussion. Last week we talked about, or a couple of weeks ago, we talked about, what are people planning and hoping to do this year? Maybe you want to own your own business. So having these conversations about wealth and money and how money works, we're building, we're compounding, Mariko, we're compounding the discussion to help people grow in their knowledge so that they can grow in their wealth. We sure appreciate all that you all have shared with us tonight. And we like to give our guests an opportunity to give their final thoughts before Dr. Kane and I share ours. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start with, I'll start with Mariko, so I'll end with Mariko. I'm going to start with Greg. What would you like to share with our audience before we log off tonight?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you and your audience. I just want people to understand there's always options in your life. And it's just a matter of taking some initiative and not necessarily talking to people on the street and all, but really doing research and trying to talk to someone that can actually give you some meaningful information. There's always things that can be taken care of, even if it's incrementally. It's important to start someplace, and to thinking in terms of wealth building is also thinking in terms of how can I do it in the most dignified and careful way that respects myself first and those that I love best. And I think that really is one of the other walkaways from this conversation I like for people to have.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Mariko? You're on mute.
Two things that I would like for someone to think about is, how can I increase my literacy? Because knowledge corrects behavior, and correct behavior alter your future. You cannot talk your way out of something you behave your way into. You have to behave your way out of it. So one of the things I want to make sure somebody do, I'm going to mail them a How Money Works book for free. I'm also going to get them connected to our financial literacy class that we do throughout the year. And then if they feel like they need some more specialized help based on their personal situation, I'll sit down and do a financial needs analysis complimentary for them, just to help them achieve some of their dreams of being financially independent, and also protecting their wealth as well. So I would just say get connected. The information is there. And I just really appreciate both of you just allowing me the opportunity to speak about something I have a passion for.
Thank you. And thank you both again. Dr. Kane, do you have some final thoughts for our listeners?
May I interject one thing? I know I had my time to talk, but let me just say,
sure,
if anybody gets the contact information and lets me know that they contacted me because of this podcast, I'm willing to do a consultation with you, complimentary. So as usually is usually a consultation fee, but because you come from this audience, I'd be happy to do that. So I want to be as generous as my co-guest tonight. So please avail yourself if that's something that sounds useful to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. That's awesome. We appreciate that. Dr. Kane?
Yeah, I most certainly appreciate both of you guys for coming on and helping our audience and myself take the next step forward. I do plan on utilizing, be quite frank with you, both of you guys' services, because, again, I'm at a different a point in life, but that doesn't say I don't need some guidance from both of you guys. So I need that additional guidance as to what to do next and how to make sure that what little wealth I got is still I can retain it. I can make sure I can take care of myself at a later age, whether it's as an individual or someone else helping to take care of me from that standpoint. And I have to end with this one thought. I remember a situation in which someone that's very dear to me, they wind up, they had some property. We're just going to say a house that wound up being a very expensive piece of property that they had 4 children and they never really did any estate planning. And when they passed, right after they passed, one of the children passed, and before the estate could be settled. And then another one, I think, also passed. So you wound up with 2 children. But even though it might seem like it was 2 children that had the assets to split, it was the other 2 children that were now part of the estate mess that had been created. And it was as many as probably 16 to 20 other people now involved in that whole estate mess. And since you guys mentioned earlier about property going to waste and losing out on some property because things were not done, now you, instead of having to deal with 4 people, you wind up having to deal with damn near 30 people, and I'm sure if the person was still alive, that would be of concern to them. And if they realize that was going to happen, maybe they would have taken care of that before they passed on. So I said that just as an example of how messy things can get I got plenty of them that happens at the office that I can use as an example, but how messy things can get upon your demise, or just in terms of you no longer capable of making those decisions. And people with Alzheimer's, which we see in a whole lot of dementia these days, those people don't lose it all of a sudden. It may be slow in its progress, but they also get to see how their children interact with each other, sometimes not so favorably. And it really hurts them to see it. So if you can avoid that by, once you build your wealth, you can definitely avoid it by making sure you have in place a plan upon either your death or your inability to take care of yourself and or your estate. So I want to thank you guys for really coming on, helping us clarify this. We're going to move on to next week. We're going to have a part 2, because there's also times that you can have gentrification of a neighborhood because of lack of understanding in terms of estate planning and or building wealth enough to manage the estate that you have. And like you say, that estate is you. So whatever that estate, to the extent of financial dollars may be, is still an estate because it's you. So thank you guys very much for coming on board. And we look forward to having you guys come back again. And we will stay in touch. And you can bet you'll hear, both you guys will hear from me.
So one thing that Dr. Kane, thank you, Dr. Kane, that he hinted on is, I know I'm not the only one. I know many of you can say it. We're all receiving phone calls from people wanting to buy our properties. I'm sick of it. I'm sure you're sick of it. But the reality of it is that a lot of people are now, they're selling their property, but finding it very difficult to find something comparable that's affordable. So we want to continue the discussion and talking about the property that we do own and the importance of keeping your property, or at least, again, as Mariko and Greg said tonight, learning as much as you can about the decisions that you make that can affect you while you're living and your family when you're gone. So stay tuned. Join us again on next Tuesday as we continue the discussion about building and protecting the wealth within your family.
And yourself.
And yourself. Thank you
All
to
right.
our guests.
Good evening.
Thank
Happy
you,
New Year,
guys.
everyone.
Good evening.
Same
Have
to
a great one.
Much appreciated.